Pavel Mintyukov scores his first NHL goal. We'll talk about his performance, expectations for him this season, and then we'll answer some mailbag questions from our listeners. All coming up on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi and Sebastian. And on today's episode, we'll be breaking down Pavel Mintyukov's first NHL goal. We'll look at how his performance was in that game, some expectations for him this season, what we can expect from him moving forward, and what type of player the Anaheim Ducks have on their hands this year. And then we'll answer some mailbag questions from our listeners for our final two segments. We've got a lot to go through, so we'll make sure to answer all your questions and give you some in-depth analysis on these questions and what we think of them. Before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase at GameTime.com or on the Game Time app. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you have any questions, we'll answer them in mailbag segments just like this. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So, Sebastian, let's start with Mintyukov's first NHL goal. He played exceptionally well in that game. According to Hockey Stat Cards, he had the second best game impact for the Anaheim Ducks in that game. Played an extremely solid game, was involved in all sides of the game, including defensively, which isn't easy for a rookie in the NHL among defensemen, as we know very, very well. What are your thoughts on Mintyukov's performance, and how do you see that playing out regarding his future with the Anaheim Ducks this season? Because he's still eligible to get sent down if the Ducks want him to be.
Yeah, I mean, Mintyukov's a really special player, and I think going back to his draft year, one of the things that stood out so much with him was the combination of really high-end tools and elite level skill with impressive defensive ability. He's really solid in his own zone. He's quite physical. He's able to clear the net front. He's able to do the dirty work that you don't usually see your high-end offensive defenseman doing. And it makes him kind of a unique mold as a player. And I think it's already shining through in his couple NHL games here. His first game was a bit rougher than the second game was, but we're going to focus on the positives here with the second game, where I thought he adapted really well compared to the first game, where he was a little bit out of his depth. I thought that he was still very much adapting to the NHL pace, as young players inevitably have to over the course of the rookie seasons and well beyond that. But I thought that he came back really strong in the second game, and he was really using his strengths to his advantage. He was using his mobility to create separation with the puck on his stick. He was using his mobility to create space off the puck in the offensive zone. I thought defensively, he was covering the slot pretty well, and he got a reward with a goal where he was just kind of patiently waiting around the slot, and the puck came to him off a rebound, and he slotted it home, and it was a really nice NHL goal, and he celebrated hard. Like, it was clear, for every player, it's a massive achievement to score first NHL goal, but Mintyukov did not hold back in a celebration. It meant so much to him, and it was nice to see just how happy he was, because there's also a player that I have a big soft spot for. I got to watch him live a ton last season here in Ottawa after he got traded at the OHL trade deadline. And you definitely have a new sense of appreciation for a player when you get to watch them night in, night out live for the better, probably 2 months or so. It was great. I went to every game and had a blast while he was here, and very glad to see him succeeding in Anaheim so far. And while he might not stay in the NHL the entire season, that wouldn't really be my expectation for him. He probably could, and that in itself is pretty exciting. And wherever he does end up developing, I think that because he's such a versatile player who's so capable in all three zones of the ice, he could use AHL development, but he doesn't need it as much as other players that are still his age. So I think he could be kept in the NHL long term. But if he gets some more refining to do down in the AHL and get sent down, I think that'll be perfectly fine for his development too, because overall he has to learn the professional pace of play. That's, I think, the biggest thing that he has to still adapt to, just like the vast majority of young players.
Yeah.
But he's starting off really well, and I'm very excited to see how he does this season.
Absolutely. And what I really liked about his first NHL goal was he basically spent the entire time below the hash marks, and that's such a
Mhm.
Pavel Mintyukov
Mhm.
thing.
He
He
was a forward
understand.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially, and it was fun to watch because you know how we both know how confident Mintyukov is offensively and how willing he is to identify that sometimes he doesn't have to be at the blue line. He's a very active defenseman in the offensive zone, so to watch that in practice for the Anaheim Ducks and to see it work so well for him in that game. And the fact that he was still very good defensively, he wasn't compromising defensively. Um, he wasn't sacrificing his offensive game in favor of defense, and the opposite is true as well. He wasn't sacrificing his defensive game in favor of his offense. He had hit the balance, and that's the one thing we didn't see in his first NHL game, but in his second NHL game was very clear that he adapted. He found a way to make it work, and on that play, he had a forward covering for him at the blue line. He didn't need to rush back on that play, or he trusted his teammates to help him out there, and they absolutely did. It's really refreshing to see Mintyukov come back to what works so well for him, and it's his confidence. He's an extremely confident, but extremely skillful player as well, and that combination is lethal at the NHL level. I'm really excited to see what happens with Mintyukov this year. Do you think he ends up being, a player who sticks around in the NHL for the better part of the season, or do you see it more realistically for him in terms of, ending up going down, spending his final year of eligibility in the OHL, and then eventually next year kind of making himself a staple of the NHL lineup? Do you think it's too early to keep him in the NHL right now? I don't think so, but I want your thoughts on that, really.
I think my guess at this point in time is that he gets sent down to the AHL because he's a European player, so he's able to escape that CHL NHL agreement.
Mhm.
And I know the expectation here in Ottawa is definitely not to have Mintyukov back and
Yeah,
playing. So I'd be pretty shocked if he got demoted back to the OHL to play junior hockey, because he's kind of just graduated from that level. I don't think he has too much to learn anymore
for
against
sure.
OHL competition. He was already the joint best player in the league last year with Shane Wright, and this season I don't think it'd be much different. So I think that most likely is that he ends up in the AHL for most of the season, unless he really makes his mark here in the NHL, and I'd be so happy to be proven wrong about that. That if he's able to do so, but I
Mhm.
think most likely is that he gets sent down to San Diego with the Gulls, and just kind of chips away there for the season. And I think that he's probably a full-time NHLer in a year's time, but
Mhm.
he might need another year of refining just to get accustomed to the professional pace, just to smooth that transition. Because I mean, look, he's still 19 years old. Like, the expectation here can't really be for him to be a slam dunk NHLer. Like, he has to be that right now. He's able to take some more time to develop, and I think that playing a patient is often quite a wise way of developing prospects.
Mhm.
But from what I've seen so far, there isn't a need to send him down yet. So if Anaheim wants to keep him, as of right now, developmentally, I don't think there's any concerns with that either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not against whatever situation they go with, and either way, I mean, we're not talking about a team that's probably going to contend this year. We're talking
Yeah,
about a team that
for sure.
has the time and has the building blocks set in place in order to give their young players more time, in order to let them develop. Leo Carlson's injured right now, but should be back next week. They've got opportunities to set themselves up for the next 5-6 years. So if they want to keep Mintyukov in the NHL, give him that experience, have him play in the NHL against NHL competition, and already face that level of competitiveness and intensity and short reaction time and high pressure and all the things that you get in the NHL that you don't always get in the AHL. I think it's going to be very good for his game as well. Regardless, Mintyukov is a player who is very absorbent in terms of information. He doesn't take long to figure out what works and what doesn't. And we already saw a major difference between his first game and the second game. So if he continues on this trajectory and continues to show what he showed in this last game where he scored his first NHL goal, I mean, why not keep him around, see what happens. I think him and Jamie Drysdale would be a bit too chaotic of a pairing, but yeah, I'd be very interested to see how that develops. But that wraps things up for our first segment about Pavel Mintyukov, his first NHL goal, and what we expect from him this season. Now let's get into our mailbag segments. Before that, quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings your winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, and it levels it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, you'll find exactly what you need to keep your car at peak performance. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers.
With Game Time, you can guarantee that you get the best price at the last minute. It is a very reliable app in order to get the tickets for events at the last minute. I use it all the time. It's my personal favorite. My schedule's very shifty, so it's very difficult often with other seat ticket providers to get a seat at the last minute within a reasonable price. Game Time is really reliable regarding that. You can get last minute deals or flash deals, zone deals that you can get through the Game Time app. They've got killer last minute deals, and they're fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Oftentimes I'll find myself with a free afternoon out of nowhere, and they'll have some spare money to spend, and Game Time's immediately where I go for an event in my area. They've got a lowest price guarantee as well. They've got event cancellation protection, job loss protection, a bunch of stuff that can help you out if ever the unexpected hits. So Game Time is really the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy it, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total upfront, so you're getting a great deal without any hidden fees. You can buy tickets in seconds, and within minutes, you've got the QR code that you can scan at the ticket toll, and you're in. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so moving on to our mailbag questions for today's episode. We've got a lot to go through, so we've allocated 2 segments for it. So let's get through it. We'll start off with a question by Aaron Itovich, a good friend of the show over on Twitter. He asks, imagine if you're an NHL GM, all things pre-draft and post-draft considered, do you take Leo Carlsson or Zack Benson? This is going to be a rough one. It's a difficult
painful one. It was painful at the doing our rankings in the first place. This was already a difficult one, and it's not gotten easier since. I don't think.
And it's so funny because we're talking about one player who went second overall and the other went 13th in a draft that happened like 2 months ago, and it's already a difficult conversation and discussion to be having. That's how good Zack Benson has been. That's how good he was in his draft year. We have no idea why he slipped. Well, we do. It's size, but. Overall, Leo Carlsson is ridiculously good. I mean, he's got so much finesse and intelligence and composure in his game. He dictates the pace of play. The issue is right now he's injured, so we haven't seen him at the NHL level, and we've seen Zack Benson at the NHL level, and Zack Benson is extremely impactful on the overall performance of the Buffalo Sabres when he's on the ice versus when he's not.
Yes.
I think I slightly lean Zack Benson because of that, but I think we can only get a better answer once Leo Carlsson's playing in the NHL, because that'll give us a better idea of what to expect. Because Zack Benson's career trajectory, his margin for improvement is about the same as Leo Carlsson, isn't it? I mean, they've both got the same kind of room for upside, I'd say. It's just right now we're watching Zack Benson play in the NHL, and he's just. He without him on the ice, 30% expected goals differential for the Buffalo Sabres, and with them it's 67%. I mean,
Yeah.
how many rookies can do that?
It's a 2-game sample, to be fair, but still,
Yeah.
like, it's very impressive. And
Exactly.
I think I'll preface my comments here by saying that both of these players would have ended up first overall in my 2022 draft board. Like, these are both players that I have a great appreciation for, and I think both are excellent.
Mhm.
But look, I think I gotta follow my heart on this one. I gotta go with Zach Benson. This is a player that I've been in love with ever since I started watching him play as a D-1, going
Mhm.
back to the draft seasons of Connor Geekie and Matthew Savoy. Zach Benson was a player I was watching in every Winnipeg Ice viewing in that season, and that really didn't change last year either. So
Mhm.
I think Zach Benson's a player that I have so much belief in terms of being able to make it work no matter the situation on the ice, no matter what zone he's in, no matter if he's on the power play, the PK, at 5-on-5, 3-on-3 overtime. He always finds a way to create advantages for his team. And that has continued to be the case against NHL competition. And that's just not something that you see in many 18-year-old players, period, let alone
Yep.
18-year-old players that were drafted 13th overall for being small. So the fact that he's already doing this at this age is so impressive to me. And I think that with both Benson and Carlson, so much of their value comes from just how intelligent they are.
Yep.
But I think with Zach Benson, it's a slight notch ahead on the hockey IQ basis. And I think that for me is a slight tiebreaker between the two because,
Yeah.
as you said, like Leo Carlson is this tremendous power forward playmaker who is going to be a difference maker for a really long time. And he's like Anaheim Ducks fans are going to adore him and he's going to be special and he's going to do a ton of amazing things.
Mhm.
I just think Zach Benson will do just that, while perhaps being a little bit more valuable in a variety of different situations. So I'm with you. I'll give the win to Zach Benson here. I'm gonna veto myself of my draft rankings a couple months ago, where I had a similar internal debate where I gave the coin toss to Leo Carlson.
Mhm.
But I think in a couple months since then, I would switch that back around.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, which players have impressed so far in the NHL? A question by Casey Lee, a longtime listener of the show. Obviously Zach Benson. We've talked about him
Yes,
in depth, but apart from him,
shocking.
yeah, no. Apart from him, though, I've been fairly impressed with Fraser Minton. Out of
Yeah.
Toronto, he's been really impressive in the viewings that I've gotten from him. And heading back into the preseason, I watched him, and I was just astounded how quickly he got NHL caliber. I
Yeah.
knew he was gonna be this kind of player. I just didn't know he'd be this kind of player this quickly. I thought it'd take him easily 3-4 years, which put him kind of in my second round range. But wow, I mean, he's been just so reliable on both sides of the puck. His positioning is solid. His board battles are solid. His ability to get off the boards is solid. I mean, there are so many small, mature details in his game. You would never believe this player's 19. And yeah, he's
Yeah.
been fairly impressive as well. Anyone else for you that's really stood out so far in terms of prospects?
I mean, it's a bit boring, but I'm gonna go with Logan Cooley. I think Logan
Of
Cooley's been
course.
tremendous so far for
Yeah.
Arizona, and is a quite legitimate Calder candidate, and that's with Connor Bedard existing on this plane of the
Yes.
earth. So the fact that I'm even saying that's pretty cool. So I think
Yeah.
Logan Cooley's been excellent in my viewings of Arizona so far. He's been a really commanding presence on the ice. Like, yes, there are moments where he's unable to get onto the puck, and then he's maybe floundering around a little bit, but for the most part, with the puck on his stick, he is just as dynamic against NHL competition as he was last season against NCAA competition. And it's been a really smooth transition so far from what I've seen.
Yeah.
And on that team, it's quite clear. It's Logan Cooley and Clayton Keller on a different plane compared to the rest of the lineup.
Mhm.
And the fact that he's already, I think, only a couple steps behind Clayton Keller. And Clayton Keller took a long time to develop to become the special player that he is today. And Logan Cooley is going to catch up really soon. So I think there's something interesting brewing over there in Arizona. While I think that their drafting choices have been perplexing at times over the past couple seasons, Logan Cooley is a pick that is aging so nicely, and he's already looking like the Calder candidate that he is. So very hopeful on that front for sure.
Absolutely. And to close things off for a second segment, who are the most under and overrated affiliated prospects in your opinion? This is from EIHL Analysis over on Twitter. It's a bit of a broad one. I think in terms of underrated prospects, I think Maki Samoskevich comes to mind. He's a player who doesn't really get the credit he's due over in Florida, and he's always been a very, very skillful, very quick, kind of a buzzsaw of a player, really intense as well on the forecheck. Always likes to speed up play, but does it extremely well and does it intelligently. So I've been fairly impressed with him. Anyone else that comes to mind in terms of underrated?
I'd probably still go with Jimmy Snuggerud as being underrated. I
Mhm.
haven't really seen too much talk about him since he really started lighting up the NCAA about like 8 months ago.
Yeah.
It's kind of quieted down since then, but I think that Snuggerud is still a really great player. And while he's not always the flashiest, he's so effective in so many different ways, and he's so versatile with the puck
Mhm.
that I think that he's a really comfortable, like at least second line projection in my mind as of right now. And while I do think that he's quite highly rated within NHL circles, and if he were traded, he'd get a massive return probably.
Yeah.
He's not necessarily the most talked about among fan bases outside of St. Louis, at least. So
Mhm.
he's definitely one that comes to mind as being a little bit underrated. And I'm actually going to go with an NTDP teammate of his for the overrated. I'm going to be slightly controversial take, but I'm going to go with Cutter Gauthier as being a slight bit overrated. I think he's excellent. I think Cutter Gauthier is a really good prospect. I think he's going to be a very good second line center for a very long time. But this is a player whose value is really pumped up by him having been drafted 5th overall. He had a great World Championships. He's very good against NCAA competition. I think he has a great shot. I
Yeah.
don't think it's elite to the level that some people may be hyping it up to be. Uh, I think that he's going to be very effective in in a variety of situations at the NHL level. But I don't think that he is an elite game-breaking talent, which I think that many outlets, media outlets especially, have been portraying him to be.
Yeah.
But again, but very good player. And when we're talking about overrated, underrated, it's always relative.
Yeah.
But with Gauthier, I do think that his value might not be quite as high as it's hyped up to be as of right now.
For sure. I'm kind of going to go in the same vein for my overrated player. It's going to be Daniil Boot, who was drafted 12th overall by the Arizona Coyotes. I don't think he's a first rounder, even with hindsight.
Mm,
I still very much
hot take.
concerned. I'm still very much concerned with the hockey sense, with the physical play for a player that big to get out muscled so often by smaller defensemen than him. Is concerning. I still have my concerns regarding that. It's not just a balance issue, straight up that he doesn't really know how to place his body and often goes for the puck before trying to establish body positioning, which at his size, he should absolutely know how to prioritize body positioning over puck possession. But he doesn't. So I have my concerns, but I'll let things play out and kind of see how where we're at in 3-4 years. Maybe with hindsight, I look ridiculous for this take, but I think his size played a major role in where he got picked. I think if he was 5'11", we wouldn't be talking about him in the top 2 rounds. It's just NHL teams like big players. The skill set isn't particularly impressive, and yeah, I'm concerned with the pick there. But we'll see how that plays out. We'll get into some more mailbag questions. We got 3 more to go through before the end of this episode. Before we get into that, though, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects.
Sidney Crosby scores a hat trick. Your team wins the Stanley Cup, and you win 100 times your money with the Sleeper app. These are all possible scenarios for this season if you get started playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. With studs like Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, and NHL prospect Connor Bedard lighting up the league this season, the NHL is more exciting than ever. All you need to do is pick a couple stats such as goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more to create the best lineup and the best outcome for your team. Use promo code Locked On NHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details.
All right, so we're going to close things off for today's episode with a couple more mailbag questions. We'll go ahead with another question from EIHL Analysis here. Early thoughts on the 2025 class. James Hagins looks like a franchise stud, with Michael Misa not far behind, and Hensler is the best defenseman prospect since Rasmus Dahlin, in my opinion. Let's start with James Hagins. Ridiculously skillful. Anything you want him to do with the puck, he can do. He's one of the most dynamic prospects I've watched in a long time. He's so fun to watch, and even as a draft -2 last year, playing with the NTDP U18s, he stood out like massively. He was a driving force on that team. He was able to make plays with efficiency, with accuracy, but especially with a lot of creativity. He's an extremely creative player as well. Um, the mental foundations of his game are so solid. I mean, we're talking about it right now: creativity, dynamism, intensity. Kind of taking his line by force and just essentially making it his. He's such a pivotal element on any line he plays. I'm just really impressed so far with the overall skill set. Do you see any weaknesses in this game though? Anything that really stands out as a concern in terms of what you don't like in James Haven's game?
It's a tough question. I don't
Yeah.
think I do. I mean, I haven't scouted him to the point of digging deep and trying to like really find small details that I can poke some holes in. But from what I've seen so far, I've been floored in every viewing I've had
Yep.
of James Hagins. This is a player who looks like he's 20 years old when he's 15. Like, I mean, he's 16 now, right? I think, but
Think so, yeah.
when I started watching him, he was a 15-year-old player looking like a 20-year-old. And I'm saying that in terms of the skill he portrays, but also just the confidence and the composure he has on the ice. He's really commanding with the puck on his stick, and he's quite dominant overall in how he plays the game against USHL competition. He is able to find solutions to basically every problem that you face in that league. And he does so quite creatively and with flash and flair and finesse. And he's a tremendously skilled playmaker, and he gets to goal scoring positions very frequently. He's a very good shot. He's a high end handler. He is a plus level defensive piece. He can do basically everything. And as of right now, yeah, he's definitely my favorite to go first overall in 2025. I think at least early on, he'd be a high end contender for first overall in 2024. Without even like calibrating him as being a year younger than the rest of the draft class on this season. So I think he's excellent. James Hagins is the player that many should be excited for, and an NHL team's going to be very happy when they land him. Whereas Michael Misa is perhaps a bit less outright dominant at the same age, but he's really flashy and really skilled. A ton of fun to watch in the OHL. He's already one of the better players in the league, and he was as a rookie too, with exceptional status, and ton of fun to watch. He's able to get fans out of their seats. He's a ton of skill, great handler, really good instincts in terms of taking the most effective routes to dangerous areas on the ice.
Yeah.
And overall, like, he's so much fun. But I think that James Hagins, at least as of now, is a couple steps ahead in terms of overall NHL projection, but also current like dominance against his competition.
100%.
But both are very fun.
For sure. Moving on to Jerry's question over on Twitter. Are there any top prospects for this draft year that you were not very high on that other scouts seem to love? Players you'd stay away from? It's a bit early for that. But I still
Definitely
want to.
early.
Yeah, I still want to just talk about a couple players. We've talked about them already, but obviously Cole Eiserman, we talked about him last year. It's not a player I'd stay away from, but he's a player that I would be a bit cautious with in terms of where you're picking him, because I feel like top
Yeah.
3 is difficult to justify for a player who is very good at what he's good at. I mean, he's one of the best goal scorers, not just in this draft class, maybe in the last 3 or 4 draft classes. He's got a fantastic shot. He can find space in the offensive zone really well. It's just when that's all you bring to the table. I mean, we saw it with Alexander Holtz. You usually it's a long development curve in order to become an NHLer. And if you're picking top 3 in a draft class like this, might not be the route to go. Another player I'd put in that category is probably Anton Salayev, right? I mean, he's a player that's been considered kind of a bubble top 5 player because he was playing really good in the KHL to start the year, but there are some glaring concerns in this game. I still think he's a top 15 talent, maybe top 20 at the worst.
Yeah.
But I don't see the top 5 conversation with Salayev. So those are two players that so far tentatively, very tentatively, those are two players that I'd say we're both on the same page on in terms of being a bit more
Yeah,
cautious than the average scout that we see online.
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like all of these takes have to be really big with a big label of like this is tentative. Like these are
Mhm.
very, very, very early first impressions,
Yeah,
and our views are going to shift as the season goes on because that's the beauty
exactly.
of scouting. You're constantly trying to absorb more information, trying to see more details, to learn more, see how a prospect develops within that given year.
Yeah.
But with Yzerman, yes, there are definitely a couple of concerns that I have where I'm not like plastering him right into my top 3 like instinctively. I currently
Mhm.
don't have in my top 5, I don't think, but that could shift. It's nothing set in stone as of right now, and it's not a draft class where I feel like there's a massive, massive, massive gap between first and 10th overall. Not
Yeah.
like last year, for instance. One more player I'll put in there as being one where I'm a little bit cautious, perhaps relative to the consensus, would be Artem Lovshunov. I
Mhm.
think that he's a fairly solid player in many ways, but I think his decision making with the puck is definitely questionable. His shooting habits in the offensive zone are an issue in my eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see how he does against the NCAA competition this year because the D-1 tape I saw, I had more questions than answers from it, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping that changes now with the NCAA season getting started.
Mhm.
But yeah, those are probably 3 names that we're a little bit more cautious on relative to consensus rather than low, because as of this point in the season, we don't really have any rankings to go off of, whether they be our own or of just other public scouts in general. So it's all about whether we're cautious rather than low, because low just doesn't really accurately reflect
Yeah.
like early season draft takes very well.
Yeah, no worries for sure. And just to end things off, Abe Sebs asked a really good question over on YouTube in one of our comment sections. Um, he was talking a bit about Kirby Dach and his situation, how he gets injured often, and asked us what are our thoughts on injury prone players or injury prone prospects? Is it a hockey IQ thing? I'd answer that by saying sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's a matter of a player, putting himself in situations where his head is down in dangerous ice. We saw it a lot with Yuri Slafkovsky in his draft year. That was a major issue. Is because he wasn't scanning, because he was figuring out his next play after lowering his head to catch a puck along the boards. He was getting caught with his head down often. He wasn't identifying that the threat was coming fast enough. Wasn't really placing himself in situations to either, reverse hit a player or get around the hit, that kind of thing. There are some occasions within prospects where you kind of look at their game and say, "Oh, this might be an issue in terms of injuries." There's also the player's frame can simply be something that they might be built in a way that is conductive to injuries. Players that are often very tall and very frail um, can get injured really easily. Thinking of Maverick Lamoureux, I believe in this draft year had a difficult time with injuries as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see a player like Dmitry Simashev get injured a couple times, that kind of thing. There are some players, some builds of players that are just more prone, especially to ankle and knee injuries. Because there's a lot of tension due to them being tall, but not necessarily muscular in their lower body. Um, your knees are compromised, your ankles are compromised, that can kind of affect your career trajectory as well. So it's all a matter of kind of evaluation with these type of guys and just seeing based on tendencies what to expect there. So I think those are the main two things, but um it's a case by case basis. I don't think every player who's injury prone it has bad hockey IQ or is built a certain way that makes him more prone to injuries. Sometimes it's just bad luck.
yeah,
Sometimes you get Hodgkin's lymphoma in your draft year. There's no way to predict that, no way to
yeah,
expect that. Genetic issues can affect it as well. There are so many factors with injuries that I wouldn't kind of place it on necessarily one thing. But our jobs as scouts is kind of to take everything into consideration and make an evaluation based on that. But yeah, that wraps things up for today's episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on in sports. And make sure to tune in for our next episode as we break down some other news around the NHL, including Kirby Dach's injury, Easton, Cowan, and Denver Barkey doing really well in London, and a lot more. Make sure to tune in for that. This has been Hadi and Sebastian. Hi, and we hope you tune in next time.